My son stood up with his glass in his hand, put his palm on the back of my chair, and told the whole table that I was the retired janitor. He said it lightly, the way you'd mention the weather. "This is Eleanor," he said. "She used to clean the building on Aldridge. Retired now. She still likes to come to these things." Then he laughed. And because he laughed, everyone at the table laughed too, and a woman in a red dress leaned toward me and said it was so nice that I still got out of the house. I kept my hands where they were. My right thumb found the knuckle of my left hand and pressed it, the way it does when I need something to hold on to, and I smiled at her and said yes. It was nice. The candle in the middle of the table had burned down crooked. I remember looking at the wax running down one side and thinking about how somebody would have to scrape that off the linen in the morning, and how it comes off easier with ice than with hot water, and how nobody at that table had ever thought about it once in their lives. Marcus sat back down beside me and squeezed my arm like he'd done me a favor. "I want you to understand something before I go any further. My son is 44 years old. He wears good suits, and he shakes hands with both of his, and every person in that ballroom that night believed he was the reason that company existed. He'd been telling them so for 6 years. And the strange part, the part I still turn over at night, is that I don't think he was lying to hurt me. I think he'd said it so many times that he'd started to believe it himself. That's how it goes with a story. You tell it long enough, and it stops being a story and starts being the truth, and the real truth just sits there at the table in a navy dress it hemmed itself, holding its own knuckle, saying yes. It's very nice to get out of the house." The gala was at a hotel on Michigan Avenue, the kind of place with a ceiling so high the noise gets lost in it. 212 people, most of them ours, 25 years of the company, that's what we were celebrating. There was a slideshow running on a screen near the stage, old photographs fading into each other, and I'd already seen 2 pictures of myself in them without a single caption. Just a woman in a gray uniform with her hair pulled back, standing in a hallway. Nobody looked twice. If you like stories about ordinary people who carried more than anybody knew, stay with me on this one and go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. There are a lot of people out there being introduced as the retired janitor. I'd like them to hear how this one ended. My name is Eleanor Bennett. I'm 71 years old, and I have arthritis in both hands from 30 years of wringing out mops and, later, from signing things. In 1987, I was 32, widowed 11 months, with a 6-year-old boy and a job cleaning offices on the 14th floor of a building on Aldridge Avenue. In 2011, I stopped being the person who ran that company day to day and handed it to my son. In between those 2 dates is everything, and almost nobody in that ballroom knew any of it. That was on purpose mostly. I never liked to fuss. I signed things with my initials. I let the letterhead say the name of the street instead of my name, because Aldridge sounded like it had been there a long time, and Eleanor Bennett sounded like a woman with a bucket. I told myself that was smart. For a long time it was. But the thing about staying quiet is that it stops being a choice at some point. It becomes a habit, and then it becomes a hole, and then one night your own son puts his hand on your chair and fills the hole with something easier to say. We had a new CEO that year. Marcus had brought him in 8 months before, from outside, and the 2 of them didn't get along in a way I'd been noticing, but not asking about. He was up near the stage, that man, holding his glass without drinking it, and at some point during the salad course I looked up and found him watching our table. He wasn't laughing. He was going to speak at 9 o'clock, and there were 40 minutes left. And I had no idea yet that he had spent his whole first year in that building looking for a woman whose name wasn't on anything. The main course came out and the table went back to talking about itself. Marcus was telling the man across from him about a contract in Milwaukee, moving the salt shaker around to show how the routes worked, and the man kept saying, "That's smart, that's smart." To my son's left sat a woman named Priya, who ran our compliance office, and who had, 3 years earlier, sent me a card when I had my gallbladder out. She caught my eye once across the flowers and gave me a small look I couldn't read, and then somebody asked her something and she turned away. Up on the screen by the stage, the slideshow kept going. 25 years of photographs on a loop, and no sound, so people mostly ignored it. Then a picture came up that stopped my fork halfway. It was the lobby of 1400 Aldridge. Not the way it looks now, with the glass and the security desk, but the way it was, with the brown tile and the ashtray stand by the elevators and the radiator that banged all winter. Somebody had taken the photo from the mailboxes, and you could see the floor shining, and I knew exactly whose knees had put that shine there because the wax on that tile had to be done in sections, and I did the west half on Tuesdays. The picture held for 4 seconds and moved on to a golf outing. Nobody at my table looked up. I was 32 years old the first time I walked into that lobby with a bucket. My husband Tom had been gone 11 months by then. He worked for the gas company and he was 41, and it was his heart. And there is not much more to say about it except that it happened on a Thursday, and by the following Thursday I understood, in a very practical way, that nobody was coming to help us. There was a small policy that paid for the funeral and about 4 months of rent. Marcus was 6. He had a cowlick that no amount of water would lay down, and he'd started sleeping with the light on. I took the job because it was nights. That was the whole reason. Nights meant I could be home when he woke up and be there when he got out of school, and it meant I only had to find somebody to sit with him from 10 to 6. And Mrs. Kowalczyk downstairs would do that for almost nothing because she was up anyway with her hip. The company that hired me was called Midwest Maintenance. My supervisor was a man named Roy Dolan, who carried a clipboard he never wrote on, and who told me on my first night that the trick was to look busy near the elevators, because that's where the tenants see you. Roy is dead now. I want to be fair to him. He wasn't cruel, he was just finished. The way men get when a job has been eating them for 20 years and they've decided to stop noticing. The building had 11 tenants and every one of them was unhappy. I know that because I read their complaints. They'd leave notes for the cleaning crew taped to the inside of the office doors, and Roy would pull them down and throw them out on his way through, and I started pulling them out of the trash and taking them home in my coat pocket. The notes all said the same thing in different handwriting. The bathroom on 12 has been out of paper for 3 days. Please stop moving my papers. The carpet by the window has been wet since Monday and it smells. Whoever is doing this floor is not doing this floor. That last one was about the 9th, which was Denny's, and Denny was 17 and had a band. I want to be honest about what I felt reading those notes, because people like a story where the woman is noble from the first page, and that's not what happened. What I felt was insulted. Not for me, for the work. Anybody can push a mop badly. It costs the same amount of time to do it right, and doing it wrong meant somebody like me was going to come along later and have to fix it. And meanwhile, the whole floor thought that's just what cleaning was. That's what got under my skin. Not the money, not yet. The sloppiness. So I started fixing things that weren't mine. I did the 12th floor bathrooms on my own time. I got under the sink on 9 with a wrench I brought from home. I found out the wet carpet was a window seal, not a spill, and I told the building manager, and he said, huh, and it got fixed 6 weeks later. And then, in March of 1988, the law firm on 14, Hallberg and Cross, 6 lawyers, 11 staff, the best floor in the building, put a letter under the manager's door saying they were done with Midwest Maintenance and they'd be finding their own service. I read that letter at 11 at night, standing in a hallway with my cart, and something in me went very quiet and very clear. I sat down on the floor outside 1412 with my back against the wall, and I wrote out, on a legal pad I took from the supply closet and later paid back, what it would actually cost to clean that floor properly. Not what Midwest charged, what it cost. Hours, supplies, the wax, the machine rental, a margin so it wasn't charity. I knew every number because I'd been doing the work with my own two hands for 14 months. I knew that the corner offices took 11 minutes each, and the conference room took 22, and that the whole floor could be done right in 3 hours and 40 minutes if you weren't fooling around by the elevators trying to be seen. I came in the next morning at 8:30 in the only good blouse I owned, holding 4 pages of lined paper, and I waited in the reception area of Hallberg and Cross for an hour and 10 minutes until Arthur Hallberg had a gap. He was 60-something, heavy, with reading glasses down his nose. He looked at the pages for a long time without saying anything. Then he asked me one question, which was, "How do I know you'll still be doing this yourself in 6 months?" And I said, "Because it's my name on it now." He hired me for 1 floor at $410 a month. That was the whole thing. That was the beginning of everything that Ballroom was celebrating. 25 years of it. 212 people eating salmon under a ceiling so high you couldn't see the top of it, and a slideshow that had just shown my floor without showing me. Marcus laughed at something. I looked at the candle. There were 34 minutes left. A waiter came around with the wine and stopped at my chair a second longer than he needed to. "Mrs. Bennet," he said, quietly, like it was between us. "Tomas, my mother worked for you at the Hyde Park building." I said Dolores. He smiled and said yes, Dolores, and that she was 78 now and still made too much food for 2 people, and I told him to tell her I said her name out loud tonight. He filled my glass and moved on. The woman in the red dress watched the whole exchange and then leaned in and said, "It's lovely, isn't it, how they remember the staff?" I said it was. That's the part people don't believe when I tell them. That I said it was. That I didn't lean over and explain that Dolores Ruiz was employee number 9 and that I hired her in a laundromat on 63rd Street in 1991 because she was folding sheets like she was being paid by the fold, and that she stayed 26 years and I paid for her daughter's second semester when the aid fell through. I said, "It was," and I drank the wine. And that was the shape of my whole life in one small motion. $410 a month is what I started with. By the end of 1989, I had the 14th floor, the 12th, and the lobby of 1400 Aldridge, and Roy Dolan had been let go by Midwest Maintenance, which I did not celebrate, and did not apologize for either. I did the work myself for 2 more years. Then I couldn't, because there was too much of it, and that's when the business actually began. Not when I got the first contract, but when I had to trust somebody else with a key. That's the hardest door anybody ever walks through. I hired Dolores, then a man named Errol who had a bad back and the best eye for detail I ever saw. Then a woman named June who could handle a floor machine like it was part of her arm. I learned the paperwork the way you learn a language when you're already living in the country. Badly, then all at once. Insurance, bonding, payroll taxes, the county forms. I did the books at the kitchen table between 11 and 1 in the morning with the radio down low, and Marcus would come out for water in his socks and stand there looking at the columns. I named it Aldridge Building Services, after the street. I've told people over the years that I did that because it sounded established, because a bank in 1990 was going to take a company named after an address more seriously than a company named after a widow with a mop, and all of that is true. But there was a second reason, and it took me 30 years to say it plainly. I was ashamed, not of the work, of how it would sound. I could hear it in advance, the way somebody would say, "Eleanor Bennett. She does the cleaning, at a school function, at a church, at a table like this one." So I put a street name on the door and I signed things E.M. Bennett, and I told myself it was strategy. You do that long enough and you've built a beautiful house with no name on the mailbox. And then you can't complain when somebody else's name goes up. Marcus was 13 when he first denied me out loud. It was a school thing, an open house at St. Barnabas, and a boy asked him what his mom did. I was maybe 8 feet away at the coffee table. He said she works for a management company downtown. That's all. It's not even a lie, technically. By then I had 11 employees and 2 buildings, and I signed the checks. But I knew what he'd taken out of the sentence, and he knew I knew. And on the drive home, neither of us said anything for a while. Then he said, from the back seat, "You always smell like the stuff." The cleaner. He meant the cleaner. It's on your hands for hours and it doesn't come out with soap. I remember gripping the wheel and deciding, in about 4 seconds, not to make it a fight. I said something like, "That stuff pays for your shoes, kid." And he said sorry, and he meant it. And we got ice cream, and I never brought it up again for 31 years. I've thought a lot about that ice cream, about how a boy tells you exactly who he's afraid of being, and you buy him a cone because you can't stand the look on his face. Across the ballroom, Nathan Reyes was still standing near the stage with the same untouched glass. He'd come to us in January from a logistics company in Columbus, and I'd met him exactly twice. The first time was in the hallway on the 4th floor of our own building, where he'd introduced himself and then asked me a strange question, whether I'd ever worked at the Aldridge site. I said I had, a long time ago. He'd nodded slowly and said nothing else, and I'd gone home and forgotten it. The second time was at a Christmas thing, where he'd found me by the coats and said, out of nowhere, "There are 2 signatures on the 1994 documents, and one of them isn't anybody's on the current board." I'd said something about how records from back then were a mess, and I'd walked away, because I'm good at walking away, and because I hadn't decided yet what I'd do if somebody actually pulled the thread. Now Marcus's phone lit up on the tablecloth next to his knife. He looked at it and his face did something I hadn't seen since he was small, a kind of quick tightening around the eyes, gone almost before it arrived. He said, "Sorry, folks, 2 minutes," and stood up, and instead of going toward the lobby like a man taking a normal call, he went the long way around the back of the room, past the service doors, where nobody would follow him. Priya watched him go. Then she looked at me again with that same face I couldn't read, and this time she didn't turn away when I caught her. She reached for her water glass and said, not quite to me, "Eleanor, do you still keep copies of things?" And before I could answer, the lights over the dessert stations dimmed by half, the way they do when a room is being told, gently, that the speeches are coming. 21 minutes. I did keep copies. I keep everything. There's a green metal file cabinet in my second bedroom with every contract Aldridge ever signed between 1988 and 2011, in order, and a shoebox on top of it with the receipts for the first floor machine I ever bought. But I didn't get to say that because Priya's husband asked her about parking and the moment closed. I stepped back in 2011. People assume it was my hands, and my hands were part of it. The arthritis had gotten to where signing a stack of anything took planning, and there's a particular humiliation in having a young woman from the bank slide the pen closer to you. The real reason was Marcus. He'd come into the business at 26 after 2 years selling copiers, and he was good at it in a way I never was. He could walk into a room of building owners and make them feel like the deal was their idea. He brought us the hospital contract. He brought us Milwaukee. He worked, and he worked hard. And every single year he'd find some way to ask me, never straight out, when it was going to be his. I was 56 years old and tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. And I had one son, and he wanted the one thing I could actually give him. So in October of 2011, we sat in a conference room on Wacker with a lawyer named Ellen Fitzgerald, and I signed over operational control. President, the day-to-day, the authority, the title, the parking spot. Ellen was careful with me. She had me read the last page twice, and she said plainly in front of him, "Eleanor, to be clear, you are transferring management. You are retaining your ownership stake, 40%. That doesn't move today. And Marcus said, "Easy as anything. We'll keep it simple, Mom. Nothing changes for you." I remember thinking that was a kind thing to say. For a couple of years, I still came in on Wednesdays. Then the Wednesdays got awkward. People would ask me things and then look at him. So I stopped. Then the annual mailing that used to come to my house stopped coming, and I told myself it was because they'd gone digital. Then there was a rebrand, and the new website had a page called Our Story that began in 2011. And when I read it, I sat at my kitchen table for a while, and then I went and did the dishes. You want to know how a person disappears? Nobody pushes her off a cliff. She gets left off a mailing list and she doesn't call about it, because calling about it would mean admitting it hurt. Marcus came back to the table at 8:49. He sat down wrong, too fast, chair too close, and he picked up his water and put it down without drinking it. The man across from him asked if everything was all right, and Marcus said, "Buy her stuff. They love us." He laughed and it landed about 2 inches short of where he wanted it. Then he turned to me and put his hand on my arm again, and his voice went soft and careful, the way you talk to somebody in a hospital bed. "Hey, Mom, it's almost 9, and Reyes is going to go long. He always goes long. You've been up since 6. Let me get you the car." I looked at him. I want to describe his face at that moment because I've had years to think about it, and I still can't decide what I saw. There was concern in it. That's the thing. There was real concern in it. The boy who used to check that the front door was locked twice. And underneath, running fast, there was something that just wanted me out of that room before 9 o'clock. I said I was fine. He said, "There's dessert stuff, and then it's all speeches and thank yous. It's really nothing. And the traffic on Michigan after 10 is..." I said, "Marcus, I'm fine." And he sat back and said, "Okay, sure, of course," and picked up his phone again. That's when the man on my other side, a broad gentleman from one of the client firms who had been talking about boats for 40 minutes, turned and held out his plate to me. Just held it out. Didn't look at me while he did it. His head was still turned toward his boat conversation, and his arm came across with the plate and the crumpled napkin on top of it. And he waited for me to take it, because a woman had been introduced to him an hour earlier as the retired janitor, and his hands had simply filed that away. The room got very far away for a second. I have been on my knees with a putty knife scraping gum off the underside of a conference table. I have cleaned up things in office bathrooms at 2 in the morning that I'm not going to describe at a dinner table. None of it ever made me feel small. Work doesn't make you small. I'd have taken that plate from him at any point in 30 years and thought nothing of it at all. What made me small was that my son was sitting 9 inches away, watching, and he didn't say a word. I took the plate. I set it down on the service ledge behind us, where the busser could reach it. I sat back down and put my hands in my lap, and I looked at the candle, which was almost out now, drowning in its own wax. And I thought, I'm going to go home. Not out of anger. That's what I want you to understand. There wasn't any big flame in me. It was the flattest, quietest feeling I've ever had. Like turning off a light in a room you've decided not to use anymore. I would go get my coat, and I would call Marcus on Sunday like I always did, and we would talk about the Bears, and that would be the arrangement for the rest of my life. 25 years of a company I built with a mop and a legal pad, and I'd let it be his, all of it, including the beginning. I picked up my purse. The brass key to the Aldridge loading dock was still in the side pocket where it's been since 1997, and it knocked against my compact when I stood. Priya stood up at the same time, on the other side of the table, quickly, like something had gone wrong. "Eleanor," she said, "don't..." Behind her, the room went half dark and the stage lights came up, and 212 people started turning their chairs toward the front, and Nathan Reyes set his untouched glass down on the edge of the piano and walked up the 3 steps to the microphone. I stayed standing because sitting back down would have made noise. Nathan Reyes tapped the microphone once and said good evening, and the room did what rooms do. Quieted in patches, a few glasses still going. He thanked the hotel. He thanked the events team by name, all four of them, which I noticed. He said 25 years is a long time for any company and a very long time for one in our business, where the average outfit doesn't see 7. Then he said he wanted to talk about a folder. When I took this job in January, he said, I asked for the founding documents. That's a normal thing to ask for. What I got was a rebrand deck from 2011. A little laugh went around, the kind people give when they're not sure yet. So I went looking. There's a storage room in the basement of 1400 Aldridge, behind the old boiler access, and there are 11 boxes in it that nobody has opened since the move. He held up a hand about a foot off the podium. In one of them there's a folder with 4 pages of yellow legal paper in it, handwritten, dated March 1988. Marcus had turned to look at the stage. From where I was standing, I could only see the back of his head and one ear, and the ear had gone red. It's a bid, Reyes said, for 1 floor of 1 building. It lists the cost of wax, the cost of liners, the rental on a buffer, and the hours, broken down by room. Corner offices, 11 minutes. Conference room, 22. Something happened in my chest that I don't have a good word for. I've read a lot of proposals in my career, he said. That's the most honest one I've ever seen, because whoever wrote it had done the work with her own hands, so she couldn't lie about how long it takes. And there is a line at the bottom, in the same handwriting, that says, I will be on this floor myself. He let that sit for a second. He wasn't performing it. He said it the way you'd read something off a receipt. That folder also has the incorporation papers from 1988 and the amended filing from 1994, both signed E.M. Bennett. When our buyers ran diligence in the spring, they came back with a question, and the question was, who is E.M. Bennett, and why does that name hold 40% of this company? The room had gone properly quiet now. You could hear a chair leg. I asked around the building, Reyes said. Nobody under 40 knew. Then I asked Dolores Ruiz, who worked here for 26 years, and she talked for an hour and a half, and I only asked one question. He looked up from the podium and out over the tables. I'll tell you something personal, and then I'll stop. My mother cleaned 3 schools on the north side for 19 years. She had a system for the cafeteria floor she'd have defended in court. I grew up thinking that was just what work looked like. Somebody doing a thing properly when nobody's watching, because the alternative is somebody else has to fix it later. So when I found those 4 yellow pages, I recognized the person who wrote them. I'd been raised by her. I had my hand on the back of my chair. I remember the fabric under my fingers, that scratchy hotel weave. This company was not started in 2011. Nathan Reyes said. It wasn't started in a boardroom, and it wasn't started with capital. It was started at 11 o'clock at night in a hallway on the 14th floor of 1400 Aldridge Avenue by a 33-year-old widow with a 6-year-old at home and a borrowed legal pad. She cleaned that floor herself for 2 more years after she owned the contract. She has done every single job in every single building we service. She has stripped floors, she has run payroll, she has driven a van, she has sat with families at wakes. She hired the first 9 people here, and 4 of them are in this room tonight. At a table near the windows, a man in his 70s put his hand over his mouth. Errol. I hadn't even known he was there. Our founder is here this evening, Reyes said. I'm told she was introduced tonight as the retired janitor. I heard the sound the room made. It wasn't a gasp. It was smaller and worse than that. 200 people inhaling at once and then holding it. That's not wrong, he said. That's just not the whole sentence. She was the janitor. Then she was the owner. Then she was both for about 6 years. Somebody laughed, and it broke, And then, it wasn't laughing anymore. It was that other thing a crowd does. "Eleanor Bennett," Nathan Reyes said, founder of Aldridge. "Would you stand up so we can all see who we work for?" There is a moment before a room turns toward you and the air changes. I've cleaned enough empty ballrooms at 1 in the morning to know exactly how big that space is, how much sound it holds, and I felt every inch of it come around toward my table like water changing direction. I was already standing. That's the part that gets me still. I'd stood up to go get my coat, and my purse was on my arm with the loading dock key in it, and I was 3 steps from the door. The woman in the red dress was looking up at me with her mouth slightly open. The broad gentleman with the boats had gone white to the ears, and Marcus, my son, 44 years old, in a suit I helped him pick out for a funeral in 2009. Marcus turned around slowly in his chair and looked at me, and his face was the face of the boy in the back seat on the way home from St. Barnabas. Not defiant, not caught, just very young and very sorry and about 9 years too late. The applause started at the tables in the back, where the operations people sit, and it came forward like weather. I put my hand flat on the tablecloth to steady myself, and I found, of all things, that I was thinking about the candle, which had finally gone out, and about the wax that somebody was going to have to get off that linen in the morning, and how it comes off easier with ice than with hot water. Then Nathan Reyes said my name again, and the whole room was on its feet, and I understood that I was going to have to walk up there in front of every person who had spent the last 2 hours believing my son. The walk up there took a long time and no time at all. Nathan Reyes stepped back from the microphone and gave me the whole podium, which I thought was decent of him, and somebody had to lower it because I'm 5'2". I don't remember planning what I said. I remember the room being brighter from up there than it looks from a table. I said that Arthur Hallberg gave a widow with a legal pad 1 floor at $410 a month, and that he'd been dead 19 years, and I still thought about him every time somebody took a chance on somebody. I said Dolores Ruiz's name, and Errol's, and June's, and I asked the 4 of them to stand, and Errol wouldn't. So the people at his table stood up for him instead, which was better. Then I said the only thing I'd actually decided in advance, on the way up the steps. I said that there is no such thing as a small job, only small ideas about people, and that I had spent 30 years being certain of that on the night shift, and about 10 minutes forgetting it at that dinner table. I said if anybody in that room ever found themselves feeling like they had to shrink their beginnings to fit into a nicer room, they should come find me, and I'd tell them what the wax costs. I didn't mention my son. Not once. Everybody noticed. He was waiting by the coat check at 11:15, holding my coat over his arm like a boy at a school dance. We didn't do it there. We did it 4 days later at my kitchen table, and it was not a scene from a movie. He cried some. He said he'd started saying it the easy way at a client dinner in 2013 and never found a good day to correct it, and that every year the correction got heavier until he couldn't lift it. He said the buyer's question about E.M. Bennett had been sitting in his inbox since April. I asked him if he'd been ashamed of me or of himself, and he sat with that for a long time before he said he wasn't sure there was a difference anymore. I told him the truth, which is that I helped build the closet he'd been hiding me in. I put a street name on the door in 1990 because I was afraid of how Eleanor Bennett would sound. You can't hand a child a habit and then be shocked when he keeps it. The sale went through in the spring. My 40% turned into something that let me pay for Dolores's daughter to finish the degree she'd stopped in 1996, and I put the rest where it does some good on the west side. Marcus is still there, running Milwaukee and the hospitals, and Nathan Reyes is still asking for old boxes. The lobby at 1400 Aldridge has a new plaque. My full name is on it, and under that, the words, "Who cleaned the 14th floor herself for 2 years after she owned it," which was Reyes's idea, and which I fought and lost. I still have the brass key in my purse. It doesn't open anything anymore. I keep it because a woman handed it to me in 1997 when I bought my first floor machine outright, and because some things you carry aren't for using. I've been asked to tell this one for a while now, and I put it off. Because it's not the hardest thing that ever happened to me in that building. There was a night in 1993, on the ninth floor, with a boy named Denny and his father, and I've never told anybody what I found up there.